Alrighty, good morning, everybody. It is Friday, October 6th, 2023. I'm going to get started here and go back and review what happened yesterday. Was I wouldn't say the easiest day or the hardest day, but, the market didn't really go anywhere. Kind of opened, pulled back, and then at the end of the day popped right back to where we opened, essentially. And let's go to the higher time frame chart just to take a peek at what we were seeing here on the higher time frames yesterday, and go back to just before the open, which was basically right here. And what we were seeing was a potential daily bullish signal from the low of the day before, the low of the week. And we had an hourly signal down there, as you can see here on the hourly chart, but we didn't have the 4-hour in agreement. So I told you, yeah, it made sense for the market to pop, but we were still in a very heavy bearish market. And until the market could get through the high of the day before, we really didn't have any confirmation of that potential larger bullish rotation higher. And what we saw coming into the pre-market, right before the market opened yesterday, was the market was rejecting nearly to the tick. In fact, I think it was to the tick off the 50% retracement of the smaller leg that we were bouncing back up into. And we saw it failed. Basically, the high of the day before yesterday was the 50% to the tick. And then in the overnight session, they just could not even get up to touch it. And then just while we were doing our pre-market, the market came right back up, right to that area, and was pulling back and failing again. So I told you, if we couldn't get through there, maybe that was it for this bounce that did get about 70 points out of it. So that might have been it. We were going to fail off the 50 and potentially pull back if the bulls couldn't get through there. And sure enough, this is what happened. The market sold off all morning, came down, bounced off the 61.8 retracement of this leg up. So we had that on our charts as an expected support area. And sure enough, the market sold off right to it. And then we got this rally at the end of the day, only to come up and fail right in front of the high of the day before, right? So never were able to achieve the breakout that we would want to see for that potential bullish rotation. And if you look at the shorter time frames here, we can see all of the details. So we'll quickly go through this. And what we see here is market opened right around our scaffolding and, attempted there to come back up and come back into the high of the day before and the 50% retrace that we just talked about. And they failed a couple points in front. And then this is really the key things you want to notice if you're trading this stuff. Market tried to break out of the open holding the FMA, and then all of a sudden it failed. We got the crossover. We got the market breaking below the VWAP and then down below the holy orange power level. And so you got your bearish opportunity here to short the Hopal from the back end, again taking on literally ticks, just a couple ticks of risk, and then you were able to capture, this whole sell-off that happened. Now the market did come down into the 38 retrace of the leg up, just like it did in the overnight session. And interestingly enough, we talked about this yesterday, I think, held the 38 retrace on 2 tests, and then here, as the market sold off yesterday, we did try to hold, right? It bounced right off of it, failed right off the FMA. And there was a little bit of a stutter here until the market continued on its merry way down. So it got down through 50% of that bounce that we were looking at. And then we continued to sell off, holding the back end of the 250% of the day before. And then what do you know? We find support right at the 61.8 retrace, right? So the low of the day was basically the 61.8 that we put on the charts yesterday morning and told our traders this would be a potential rotational area. And sure enough, it bounced nearly to the tick on the first test. And then if you really scrutinize this level and zoom in, it held it, failed below it, and then held it to the downside to the tick here on 2 tests, and then got back above it and pulled back and held it to the tick for the rally at the end of the day. And like I said, yesterday we had the big pullback and then came to the 61.8 right here and then had a rally to the end of the day back to the highs. So it was it kind of, like I said, could have been a tricky day. It wasn't necessarily the hardest day, wasn't necessarily the easiest day, but that's where we got the change in polarity. And then the market started ripping higher from there. So interestingly enough, we were holding the back end of 50% of the day before, and then finally broke out, held the VWAP, pulled back, and then held the scaffolding once again. And then we got this rally at the end of the day. And if you were just here for the end of the day and you saw the market holding the scaffolding, holding the pullback to the 200 and getting through VWAP, it might have been a good idea as you saw it starting to change again, changing its face and becoming a bullish market, at least on the short time frames. You could have caught that pullback right to the 200 and got yourself over a 10-point bounce at the end of the day, right? So there were lots of opportunities. You could have been shorting the back end of the hopeful if you wanted, just didn't really get any follow through. And again, buying some of these levels would have given you some pretty impressive trades yesterday. Even shorting maybe VWAP, being that we were still below it, would have given you, again, very limited risk to the upside, just under 2 points, and you would have captured the whole push right to scaffolding, where I tell you guys we want to take profit, right in front of these areas. So there were plenty of opportunity. If you were a perma bear yesterday as it sold off, you would have been kind of taken out when you tried to short all this on the way back up. But I think the main point here is you got opportunities to short off these areas. They just didn't quite get anywhere. And when you got 3, 4, 5 points out of it, then it came back, right? This one would have been great, but then we started to really change polarity, and getting short would have been probably not the opportune thing to do here. We would have wanted to get long on the pullbacks so you could capture the larger move. But some decent price action yesterday. Our levels still working incredibly well, despite it being kind of a non-directional day and somewhat choppy. And then that brought us into our overnight session here for this morning. And what do you know? The market came back up and tried to break through the high of the day before and that 50% retrace. That, again, I'll pull up the 60-minute chart here. This is that level that we just tested in the overnight session again, right? This is the level I told everybody we wanted to get through to have any faith in there being a larger bullish rotation higher. And again, it failed off that area all day yesterday. And then at the end of the day, with that rally by the bulls, came up and then failed, couldn't even get quite to it, and then pulled back. Now here we are in the overnight session, and we're testing it again. Got a bunch of bearish signals from there, including an hourly and a 4-hour bearish signal. And then this pullback occurred. And this huge sell-off here that happened just a couple minutes ago was the release of the non-farm payroll data. So pre-market, some days pre-market, there are some very important news releases. And non-farm payroll, which is the first Friday of every month, happens to be a very, very important news drop, right? Or financial release, economic release. Because typically when you have a drop of the non-farm payroll, the market wigs out, you get increases in volatility and volume, and you can get huge pushes one way or the other. So here is, again, there's that level that the bulls just cannot get through. Major rejection this morning, and the CPI news dropped right there, and you can see a major sell-off. Interestingly enough, on the sell-off, we still held our levels nearly to the tick, right? As it failed from this very important area for the bulls, we held the back end of the high the day before. We held the back end of the FMA, and then we sold off and held the back end of scaffolding to the tick, right? And now here we are continuing in this descent, but we did find support just about a point in front of our next scaffolding. So it's still respecting the levels despite some of the wonkiness in the market. And that brings us here to our pre-market prep for this morning. So let's go ahead and jump to the higher time frames and take a look at what they have to say here this morning. So